So this is all very much about actually business-to-business relationships and regulating that.
Correct.
Okay, what's in it for me? I mean, as a supermarket shopper.
So as a result of that being successful, you would then expect there to be more innovation and suppliers to have more confidence and be able to have more stable businesses. And ultimately, you might see better prices to the consumer from the code, but it isn't the only tool that the government has put in place to address that competitive tension that exists. They've got in the Act a requirement for the existing retailers to now wholesale to independent retailers.
Yeah.
Now, that was something that was perceived as a huge barrier to entry, was that if you were a new retailer coming in, you had to form your own logistical arrangements and agreements with so many suppliers that it was really, really a lot of work to be able to supply a competitive range of products compared to the supermarkets. So this new requirement has forced the existing retailers to wholesale their range to emerging retailers, which means they can theoretically...
So the duopoly cannot basically tie up a product with an exclusive contract. I got you.
And there is actually requirements in the code that specifies that they cannot put undue pressure on suppliers not to supply
someone
other
else.
retailers.
Okay, so that's genuinely more competition.
All of these things are aimed at helping address what is a really complex and, I have to say, fiercely competitive market.
Yeah.
And New Zealand isn't any different to around the world. There's these kind of imbalances around the world where you have a concentration of power in the retail end, and the suppliers are assisted by tools like this, commissioners or arbiters all around the Western world at least, to assist in redressing this balance.
All right. How has it worked in Aussie? Because we're quite lucky. I guess we've got we can look and see how it's rolled out there and what the problems have been there.
Yes. So we've spent quite a lot of time talking to our Australian counterparts at the Australian Food and Grocery Council. We've also worked really closely with a company called Next Gen Group, which has been training suppliers and retailers actually on the Australian Code for almost 10 years. And we've partnered with them to bring some training options to our members to make sure that they're equipped really quickly with what their new protections are and what they aren't, what the supermarkets can still legitimately expect in a fierce negotiation, in a very tough negotiation, and what protections exist. So in Australia, it has worked, and there have been several revisions. It hasn't been a silver bullet, and it hasn't equalised the power, obviously. It's still a fiercely competitive negotiation between the retailer and the supplier, but there are a number of things that have improved, and we have a lot of members who work trans-Tasman that talk about some of the benefits that they've experienced, and it does give them more confidence, and there is a deterrent to some of what has certainly been perceived as unreasonable behaviour. Now, for example, in the code, it's 25 pages, 29 clauses. Reasonable is mentioned 36 times. Time and time frames.
So basically, it's don't be an a-hole.
So good faith, being reasonable and being prompt or being timely with your responses, because that's sometimes how that power imbalance plays out. So you just ignore someone. Yes, you can, because they will not be able to do anything about that. So being prompt or timely in your response, that's mentioned 13 times in that 29 pages.
Has there been any blowback from the supermarkets, from the big two, or not?
The supermarkets obviously submitted, as did we, and a range of other interested parties. They've welcomed it publicly, and they are going to be very busy because they've got...
I like the way you dropped in publicly, they've welcomed it.
Well, it's on the record, so I'm not. I would hate to quote them in the conversations I've had privately.
Pins into a dole of you behind the scenes, do you? But,
well, I know they're working really hard because they've got to do a lot of negotiating with a lot of suppliers. So I am reminding all of my members that for each negotiation they have to do with the 2 or 3 parties they're dealing with, those retailers are going to be dealing with about 3,500 suppliers in a 6-month period. So that's going to be a lot of work for them. And then we've got the Commissioner and the Dispute Resolution Scheme who will look at any complaints that come through and work through those, and they can apply penalties and make observations back to government if they think that further adjustment needs to be made to the legislative framework.